I've had several people who have requested that it be recorded, and we'll see if that works out for us today. This topic is a tough one, and it's not one that I'm in any way an expert in, and I really only feel comfortable starting kind of with the disclaimer, because I kind of feel like I'm going to maybe mess up. I'm going to try to be objective, but I also am human. And this is a highly emotional topic, and the things that I've learned are difficult sometimes to articulate using exactly the right words. Please be gentle with me, understand that I'm doing my best and the benefit of the doubt. In no way am I trying to put ideas into your head that you don't want in your head. I'm only trying to inform and to clarify on a topic that we thought for sure 10 years ago would be an irrelevant one. But today is a very, very relevant one. And that's that we never saw it coming. The rise of anti-Semitism worldwide, but specifically we're going to be talking about in the United States. It's really tough for me for another reason, because my personality and my nature is not to dwell on negatives. I feel strongly about this topic, and I hope not to offend. It's passionate for me in many, many ways. If I have a credential, I'm an identified Jew. I also have a credential that I don't pull out of my wallet too much, which is I'm a child of a grandchild of a survivor and a child of a survivor. I have those credentials, and I have a decimated family on one side of my family that I never knew. So understanding this topic is tough and emotionally related for me, and I'm sure many of you out there. Why do we have to talk about it? Because the Anti-Defamation League has reported that there have been over 2,000 anti-Semitic acts in the United States in the last year that was tracked specifically, which was 2019. And that's the most in any year since the ADL started tracking way back in 1973. Over 2,000 anti-Semitic acts. The assumption is that there were many, many more in 2020, a lot of them being online, a lot of them visible. And as we know, if we've been watching the news and paying attention, it hasn't in any way diminished in 2021. Hate crimes are up, and in the last year that this fact was tracked, 2018, 60% of those hate crimes were against Jews. 60%. An interesting thing is that I was kind of surprised to hear that, because that's not what you hear about in the general media. The anti-Semitic ones do come up, of course with Poway and of course with Tree of Life, but generally speaking, these are kind of in the back burner. They're not the ones that are in people's mind. And we certainly didn't know that 60% of hate crimes, because we don't think of, many people don't think the Jews are part of the hate crime combination these days. So the other thing is that at the current time, which was ADL's tracking again, 2019, the official year, published year, there were at least 30 known white supremacist groups in the United States active. Now it's believed that there are well over 100 white supremacist groups active in the United States. And their presence is known in every single state except Hawaii right now. The state with the highest number of incidents was Texas, followed close second by Washington State, California, New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania. Hitting close to home, there was something in Cleveland Jewish News a few nights ago about the rise in anti-Semitism and some statistics from the local director. But I think what's kind of embedded in my head is the hate that happened in Columbus on Amy Acton's lawn. For those of you who don't know, she was the medical director for the state of Ohio, and she was putting out the anti-pandemic rules for Ohio. And she was attacked as a Jew with, I don't remember if it was swastika or hate signs or whatever on her lawn. And some of us heard a presentation that she made for council saying that she was terrified and her kids were terrified. It's here, it's alive, and it's well. I'm going to screen share. I may have to take a sec to. can't I? Okay, let me give you an example. Okay, are you able to see this? Please give me a thumbs up, somebody. Marcy? Yes, thank you. Okay. This is an example of things that you may not realize are out there, that are out there in abundance in certain circles, mostly transmitted through social media, but some signage. This is one, basically any phenomenon that's happening in the world, there is a Jewish connection to, or I should say an anti-Jewish connection to. Jews are targeted. This is a recent one. If you have the bug, give a hug, spread the flu to every Jew. I'm not going to spend the next hour showing you these kinds of things. If you are so inclined, you can search them out yourself. I just wanted to give you a little taste. Also want to say that most of us who are on this Zoom live in a bubble or have lived in a bubble. We have been protected, and it's hard for us to believe that in this world today, this is a real thing. Believe me, I'm not making it up. We come from a generation that basically trusts the media. And there's a sense of professionalism in people who are reporting the news and people who are writing things. We trust our friends and what they tell us. We don't question, but it's really not like that now. We cannot live in the past. What is happening does mirror in so many terrifying ways what happened in Europe in the 1930s. News now is rare, factual news. Most news is agendized. It is, in fact, propaganda. You know that you can read the news that solidifies your beliefs, that corroborates, it tells you what you want to hear, and many of us choose only those kinds of news sources. Confirm our beliefs rather than challenge them. So that might be fine for those of us who are good people, but it's not fine for people who live in a world that is created by evil people, because they only get more and more evil. And every time they click, or every time they pass on an email, that becomes basically a different kind of virus, not the pandemic virus, but a different kind of evil that replicates itself a million or a gazillion times. Maybe you figured out that the role of social media, or as I call it, anti-social media, is huge in this whole thing. I don't know, because there's no way to know what the world would be like if we didn't have social media now. But the reality is, it is what it is. I look at social media initially as something like, in all of Judaism, it's basically a middle road. Most of the things that might tempt us in Judaism are not viewed as temptations. They're viewed as potential for good and potential for bad. And so much in social media now is skewed that way for the bad. Now, I'm saying that there are bad people out there who are doing this intentionally to manipulate, to absolutely prey on people's fears. They're experts at using trigger words. If the word socialism upsets you, you're going to see that over and over and over again. What you probably won't do is check it out. We're going to talk about some of those key trigger words in a bit. But I'm also saying that we, to a large extent, are guilty as well. Because when we see something, particularly that's passed on from an email from a friend who we've known for 30 or 40 years, or it's from some particular, somebody passed it on the web, we have a tendency to just believe it and click it and share it, or believe it and not share it. It's incumbent upon us now, since these people are not themselves malevolent, but they haven't done their homework. Frequently, they're passing on stuff that simply isn't true. And I'll give you some examples, but they take on a life of itself. And that's when we talk about folks who live in an alternative reality. They're living in their reality, and it becomes more and more real with every single time that it is shared with somebody else. So news now is propaganda, and people ravenously feed, in my view, on what confirms their beliefs rather than checking it out. I didn't realize that I had subscribed to something from USA today, which is a good thing. It's every morning I get fact check, and it's usually 19 things. And very frequently, it's a picture of somebody political, and very frequently, it's a political leader from the Democratic Party of now or the past in some horrible position or some horrible quote. For example, there was one of Barack Obama recently behind bars. And there's a title on it, and there's an explanation of what it was. And what it was, if you fact checked, was that he had visited the cell of Nelson Mandela when he was president in South Africa, which was basically a historical site. That is not what you would get. You would believe he'd been arrested for drunken driving. That was the implication. It is incumbent upon us to be smart and to not believe. Okay, enough on that particular lecture. Think before you pass it on and question, because even if your source is honest and good-hearted, they might not have the right information. Why are Jews a target so much? I mentioned that in mainstream media, Jews are not usually at the forefront in terms of targets. But in history, throughout history, Jews have been extremely kind of the all-purpose, highly useful target for anti-Semites. They've been latched on to, by many ideologies. Just think about it. They're really useful, or I should say we, forgive me, however, my choice of words, useful as the political other for other people's purposes. From the left, Jews, okay, first of all, I have to tell you, looking at a bell curve, we've got a big middle, okay? But we do have extremes, and the extremes are the ones who are making the most noise right now. We've got a silence in the middle, or a passivity in the middle, or a denial frequently in the middle, or a lack of energy in the middle. So we're going to understand and recognize it now, and I may say it again, and if I don't, forgive me, that most of us are sane people. There really is those folks. But on both ends of this particular stream, these are terrifying situations that we need to at least know about. And I'm not telling you to buy in. I'm telling you to hear and consider and make your own judgments. Please don't buy in. But as I mentioned, Jews are the political other. So from the left, in the simplest form, and I'm not making this up, Jews are white racist power grabbers. Interesting, because as we know, not all Jews are white, biologically white. Doesn't matter. This is no longer a biological term. It is what it is. It's a different reality. So from the left, Jews are white racist power grabbers. From the right, they're not quite white. They're not Christian. They're not American. They're not of European origin, but they are money-hungry conspirators. And they're seeking world domination. Let me share with you a little vignette, very short, of something. When I hear world damnation, that's a slip of the tongue, world domination, my head goes back 25 years to when my eldest son, Ben, his mom hired him for a summer job because she had a company. And we did some sort of unusual kind of training that was not our typical clientele during the summer. And he was a useful gopher and a good kid and needed the job. And I had maybe, I don't know, 6 or 8 other summer people who I didn't know hired in that particular program for that particular program. And he says to me, Mom, I had an interesting conversation today with this guy named Philip, who was from somewhere in Central Texas. And Philip told me, because he saw what I was eating for lunch, asked me if I knew what that mark was on the bag of potato chips. And I said, yeah, it's kosher. It's this thing, you know, this O and this U. And he said, no, this is Zionist domination. That mark means that this company is working with the Zionists to take over the world. I never knew that. I let it go. I never thought that 25 years later, this would actually be, in certain circles, a mainstream idea. Those marks, which are not only a U with a circle, but also a K with a circle, they're getting even more powerful. It means that these people are Zionists whose goal is to take over the world. So you learned something today. It seems crazy. It was crazy. Now it's still crazy for many of us, but it's tragic. So I said to Ben on the phone last night, am I remembering correctly? He said, yeah, Mom, that's what happened. So anyway, that's my little personal story that I'm sharing with you. So from the right, we're not white enough. Socialist, money moguls, media moguls, money controllers, world dominators. And from the left, we're Zionists and occupiers and capitalists and oppressors of people of color. Islamists were infidels. For fundamentalist Christians, we're Christ killers. At any rate, we're not true Americans. At least we're certainly not good people. So we're in a time of crisis, and I just want you to know that in many people's eyes, I don't want to say many people's eyes, I'm going to say in a substantive number of activist people's eyes, Jews are vile. I want to talk, I'm going to take a deep breath. Okay, does anyone want to say something? that was fun. Okay, I want to take a deep breath, and now I'm treading again into territory. I did my best to learn and say these things right, and many of the concepts that I want to share with you in terms of keywords and buzzwords that I want you to know about, I really had to study and digest and actually do a little bit of research with people from all over the spectrum to try to understand them. So please forgive me. This is Cheryl doing her best to try to make sense out of something that is illogical and doesn't make sense. I hadn't heard until a pro-Israel Zoom session about 2 months ago that the biggest threat to Jews now is something called critical race theory. That in itself, I'm going to say is overly simplistic, mostly inaccurate statement. But what got me is I had no idea what the heck critical race theory was. Critical race theory is a huge buzzword. It's actually an academic movement that's been around since the 1970s. And it essentially says, and when it's being taught very broadly in schools and in universities, and in its fundamental, purest sense, it's kind of a neutral thing. But it's been weaponized by both sides of the world, this bell curve. And for their purposes, it's been lied about, but it's taken on a life of itself. Critical race theory essentially says that race in itself, meaning skin color, is no more relevant than eye color or hair color. Race has become a thing because it's become a societal construct. Society has made race a thing. Okay. I hope that helps. That race is, in terms of skin color, and I'm going to stop using the word race because now race is a political word. Skin color should be lumped with, biologically is no different than hair color or eye color. But race is not about biology. Race is about a societal construct that basically influences society structures. And biology doesn't, but society does. It's systemic. This idea, critical race theory, also known as CRT, is huge and broad. And I got super upset on the first presentation that I heard, and I called some of my experts, and basically they said, most people are reasonable, it's not that bad, but there are lots of kooks out there. I'm summarizing months of, not months, but hours of research I've done for you ladies. So anyway, but the problem is the kooks. So you can take this theory and weaponize it. In the way I hope I said it, hopefully it sounds reasonable. And just like any kind of theory, it's to be talked about, it's to be examined, it's to be either adopted or discarded. But one of the things is that under the guise of being anti-racist, it uses race in every single conversation. Critical race theory means essentially that everything is about race. I listened to a podcast this morning about Scrabble games. Scrabble, the words that are acceptable. Race enters into that conversation. You know that race enters into every kind of um, staffing kind of situation. Race enters into whether or not you're going to take the COVID vaccine or not. Race in actually, there are just so many examples, and they'll come to me more of them. But it's pretty hard to have any kind of conversation about anything now where it can be a neutral, not there isn't an element of race into it. And think about it. You can just look at the media, and that's the case. That is one side of the critical race theory. We're going to go into another side in a bit. The worst part is this concept essentially that everything is about race, including all academic things. You can't do a subject like music or math without talking about race, because that has been, and some of you are scrunching your eyebrows. I am not making this up. Let me see if I can give you one example. This is from an extreme. This is coming from the great state of California. No offense to my Californians out there. I'm not blaming you. Okay, basically math is racist. Wrong answers are white supremacy. That is total exaggeration. It's taken out of context. It is absolutely true that and I hate saying left and right, because I consider them, I've always been a progressive kind of vote. That these definitions are not the definitions that we know. These are different terms, same terms for a different world right now. And I just am a lack for right words. But when we talk about race in this particular context, there's the concept essentially that it recommends that you teach math via storytelling circles, incorporating dance, music, song, and response, and other cultural ways of communicating. Because by telling someone that the math answer is wrong, you are essentially putting in a supremacy culture on top of mathematics. I can't totally digest this, okay? And some of you can't either. It's out there, and all I can tell you is go and learn if you're so inclined. Because like I said at the beginning, I am so much not an expert in it. But on the other end of this, the critical part that you can't teach anything at all from the classical view, including 2 + 2 = 4. The other end of this is lying from the right wing, saying essentially that you can't teach 2 + 2 + 4 for their agenda, because that's not 100% true. But the best I can tell you in the general term that is true is that this concept of CRT is a weapon used by both sides for their purposes, with lots of lies attached on, and extreme examples attached on both sides, a few of which actually are true, scarily enough, and most of them are not true. Okay. What it is it's dangerous for American Jews, in the sense that in many of these contexts, from either side, Jews are bad. They're on the opposite side. So it permits and it invites anti-Semitism. It even encourages it. On the progressive side, what it says is Jews are not, because of their buy-in supposedly to the social society construct of oppression, because Jews, as I mentioned before, are oppressors. You've now learned that. You're clear on that. So because from that point of view, then Jews are not welcome in leftist progressive causes. You're not welcome here. Get out. Okay. The typical American Jew has absolutely no understanding of this thing. If you can handle more good news, I'm going to mention a couple code words that happen. I had this happen in my family. Somebody was posting or reposted something that was about globalists. Let me just share with you that globalist is a code word for, and some of you were nodding your heads, thank you for confirming. Globalist equals Jew. Okay. In some circles, socialist equals Jew. In many circles, capitalist equals Jew. okay? And this one may come as a surprise to you. George Soros equals Jew. It has, okay, some of you know this already. And I've had in my family someone who who shared something about George Soros. I'm going to read you a little. The Anti-Defamation League has been tracking the George Soros kinds of things. These are long things. I can't read them all to you. You don't want to hear them. But basically, among every bad thing, at some point, George Soros has been blamed. On the other side, if George Soros doesn't fit neatly in, which is rare, then the Rothschilds are at fault, whoever those people are. Okay. And I just found out on Ancestry DNA that there's some Rothschild in my family, so it's even more my fault now. But I don't have a clue who that person is. But anyway, so basically the right is linking George Soros and the George Floyd protests that happened in Minneapolis. George Soros was responsible for all of the protests, for all of the broken windows, for all of the marches. It was George Soros. Excuse me, time for eyeglass change so I can read this. Okay. This is from June of last year. Conspiracy theorists over the last week have been busy linking Soros to the protests and the present moment. On June 2nd, former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani opined that there was coordination between the protests and a guiding hand in this of Antifa and George Soros. Bill Mitchell, a Miami-based conservative talk show host, tweeted, "Will someone please arrest George Soros?" The ADL recently reported that negative tweets about Soros jumped from 20,000 per day, that was in the low times, to 500,000 per day. Okay. The tweets range from insisting that Soros is funding Antifa to the fact that he is organizing all of the protests, whatever. There's so much, it's so ridiculous. It says, if you search George Soros on right-wing Twitter, you will find crowds of agitators convinced that he is funding organizations, making money on the vaccine, weaponizing police, justice, and everything bad. Basically, what you have to understand is you need to fill in the blank. It's not Soros, it's Jew. This is code, and it's well-recognized code. He is, and has been what is considered a progressive philanthropist for many, many years. This is not a political decision, what I'm talking to you about. This is a hate decision. He was a big pusher for criminal justice reform back in the 1990s, a long time before it was popular. And he has some positives on that side. He has some things that might be too progressive or uncomfortable for some of the people who are on this Zoom. That's not what this is about. This is about code for Jew. The conspiracy theorists use Soros as a code for Jew. It's been on and off for centuries, and he's the perfect boogeyman. He's a Jewish American financier, and he attracts anti-Semitism from the anti-elites. Okay, so I just wanted you to know that one, and I'm reminding you of the other words, which are socialist, and a big one is globalist. And you'll see, if you want to torture yourself by looking for some of these posters that are displayed by white nationalists, including the ones in the Capitol attack, you'll find these words, these bad words all the time. The other one I want to talk to you about is white. Another one I want to talk to you about is whiteness. Okay, we're not white. We're not, depending on who you ask. We're either too white for people in one circle, and we are not white in another circle. There's actually a term for this, which I can't believe. It's called conditional whiteness. In other words, it depends on who you ask. Again, it's not about the color of your skin. This is a societal contract of what being white means. White equals oppressor, okay? White means money grabbing or impure race. White means, depending on, excuse me, not white. Jew means not white enough kind of thing. So basically, you're inferior if you're not white in some circles, and you're not good if you're not white, if you are white in other circles. It's this whole thing about we thought we were white. Turns out that we were possibly, probably, maybe, fortunately, incorrect. Okay. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the New Left from my opinion, and this is difficult for me because I've carried liberal credentials all of my life. But for me and for many people, Zionism, meaning support of Israel, is a good thing. But for this particular group, support of Israel means white supremacy. They attribute whiteness to Jews and privilege. And basically, this isn't my left anymore. The definition has changed. Interestingly enough, the left claims to be anti-racist, but a lot of their things are now anti-liberal and anti-LGBTQ and anti-racist. For example, they are, and extremely racist. What hasn't been publicized a lot is that a disproportionate amount of the violence against Asian Americans has been by Black Americans, African Americans. It's been hard for me to see the faults of people who I used to consider my allies until I realized that these are not my people. My loyalty to the leftist causes that I remember has hampered my ability, and perhaps some of you, to see some of the faults that we really do need to see. If we go to Congress, we know that Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar traffic in anti-Semitic tropes. Also, a lot of rappers and comedians and a lot of campus activity has moved into the broader culture. And basically, on a one-sentence thing, without any thought or with any knowledge, on campuses, it is very highly believed that support for Israel equals white supremacy, period. And you hear the word woke. In many circles, to be woke, you have to be anti-Israel. Another term, let me check the time. Okay, we're fine. Another term we have to look at that I've educated myself a little bit about. I ain't no expert. I'm struggling maybe 3 steps ahead of some of you guys. Very possibly there's someone here who knows more than I do. I didn't want to know. I didn't need to know. But now, like I told you, it's incumbent upon us to not keep our head in the sand, to be informed. The term we have to look at is QAnon. QAnon wasn't a thing, and it was a vague thing, and now, unfortunately, it's a thing. If you look up a definition, and there are many, but I'm trying to find a neutral one, it's a far-right conspiracy theory alleging that a secret cabal of Satan-worshiping, cannibalistic pedophiles plotted against Donald Trump while he was in office. This is too good not to repeat. A secret cabal of Satan-worshiping, cannibalistic pedophiles plotted against Donald Trump while he was in office. This group, QAnon, which is almost all online and is now tens of millions, has been classified by the FBI as a domestic terror group. When we hear about the cannibalistic pedophiles that plotted against Donald Trump, you probably at this point in today's class are not surprised to know that the vast majority of them, those pedophiles, those cannibals, those Satan worshipers, are Jews and Zionists who are named Rothschild or Soros. They are the key satanic leaders. By the way, according to the FBI, this theory that I just shared was amplified and supported online by Russia. Are they, I used to say as recently as last week that they weren't officially anti-Semitic. after what's coming out, I don't know how you can say it's not in their. First of all, they do not have a mission statement. But if they had a mission statement, it may or may not be in it now. It wasn't in it a month ago. But everything they do is patently anti-Semitic. I'm not saying it's only against Jews. It's certainly against people of color. Don't misunderstand that. But from the conspiracy theory point of view, one of the things that is believed is that they kill children, QAnon believes, and they take adrenaline out of their blood. This is a revival. This is a total echo of Jews needing the blood of Christian children to make matzah. We all know that one. And it doesn't go away. It's just in a different form. Another one that has been circling is that there's a coup that's being plotted. It's been plotted for, well, this is during the Trump years, but they're still active, to overthrow Trump and his followers and people who are way beyond his followers, like these QAnon people and the Antifa people. This coup was led by, you can probably fill in the blank, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and George Soros. Right, exactly. Okay. One of their textbooks is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. When I say textbook, I'm being facetious. They don't have a reading list, but that book is very available and suggested, okay? And I showed you already the Wiesenthal thing about the Holocaust. Basically, Jews absolutely were responsible, brought in the coronavirus, okay? The ADL says, this is the Anti-Defamation League, says that even though they might not use the word Jew directly too often, it is totally constructed on a culture of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and have brought pretty much others, many others along for the ride. There are overt anti-Semitic tropes. You've seen t-shirts about 6 million is not enough, and gas chambers and Heil Hitler and everything else. You've seen the word Zionist demonized for many, 30 or 40 years now, and it has not gotten better. It's only worse. But maybe you weren't aware until now that Jews brought on this pandemic. Why? Because they want world domination. I don't know the logic. I haven't been clued in on the details of how that's going to happen. But it's reminiscent of all the old anti-Semitic tropes from the year 1091, when Jews were expelled from what is now England, the Black Death and vermin and blood libel and murdering Christians. Nothing's new under the sun. I mentioned the ADL a couple times, and ADL has been, as I understand it, somewhat criticized in how politically correct and neutral they've tried to be in terms of riding the waves of this particular ugliness that's been going on the last couple of years. What they have done, and done well, is tracking anti-Semitic attacks, but they really have not spoken out very much. They are finally now getting the word, getting the message, and they are. I don't know if any of you saw it. I didn't know what was going to be on, but and I'm terrible. I don't know what shows I watch. I have no loyalty to particular shows or stations. But on Sunday morning, there was Jonathan Greenblatt from the ADL speaking out. You saw, okay, Janice, you there? Do you remember what it was? I don't know. Well, probably.
Yeah, it was on reliable sources, right, on CNN.
He's finally, they've been criticized for not talking and not mentioning. They're doing these no place for hate things that are kind of generic. And I saw something that really upset me a few weeks ago, which is their no place for hate curriculum has a fill in the blank. And Jew is like fifth down. You can use this for any one of these targeted groups, you know. And considering the original mission of the Anti-Defamation League, we should be at the top of the list, and it should basically a lot more attention given to that. They are supposed to be protecting us. But having said that, I'm thinking it's evolving because he did speak out, and he spoke out about a particular TV personality on Fox, whose name is Tucker Carlson. If you don't know him, he totally spews nothing but hate And there's a demand for Rupert Murdoch to get rid of him. A little bit more about him in a while. But he has changed critical race theory to a different term, critical replacement theory. So what he is missionizing is that the goal of people who don't agree with him, and in other words, that's anybody from center Republican everywhere to the rest of the world heading left, or mainstream Republican, or what used to be mainstream Republican, which is a dwindling group, particularly if you heard John Boehner recently, like yesterday or the day before. He's saying that the goal of these people is to replace us. They will not replace us. Remember that trope from a year plus ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was? That's where it comes from. The idea is that white, whatever this group is called, the white race, white Americans are an endangered species. And there's a definite plan, definitely Jews are involved in it, to get them replaced, to get them out of there. So critical replacement theory is his thing. If you understand that, and this to me was a big, wide eye opener, and trust me, I'm not buying it, but it helps me get it. If you understand that that's the belief, critical replacement theory, that explains stances from his ilk on voting rights, doesn't want to be replaced, on immigrants, doesn't want to be replaced, on guns, wants to protect themselves from these people who are out to replace them, and even on abortion. I didn't get it until I started reading about it. Basically, the thought, right or wrong, and this isn't about facts, folks. This is about perceived reality, which is stronger probably than verified facts. The belief is that white Americans, for convenience or economic reasons, would, if abortion was available, avail themselves of it, if as long as it's available, be apt to avail them of it, and basically lower the birth rate of whites. And an abortion would curtail the birth of whites, and we need to populate with whites, and there aren't enough whites. This also leads to anti-feminist demonizing and taking away feminist rights, even the most basic ones, because in his view and in the ideal world that he wishes to create, and that many do also agree with him about, that women stay barefoot and pregnant and make white babies. That's what has to happen for them not to be replaced. Okay. You all know about Marjorie Taylor Greene and the space rocket thing. There's some criticism that Jews treated it with humor. It's not funny at all. But I guess, let me see, there was something I marked here that I wanted to share, and if you give me a second, I'll maybe remember what it was. Okay, the criticism here in this particular source, who is somebody you know, if you want to read about this, in the more broad sense, the things that you perhaps are expecting to read, of course, you need to check out Deborah Lipstadt. And I'm quoting just one sentence from her, which is that, this is out of context, but I think you're going to get it. The Republican caucus refused to punish, criticize, or condemn Greene in any fashion. Instead, they gave her a standing ovation. That set, now, ultimately, through the efforts of others, she was defrocked of her committees. But that was through no thanks to the Republican Party. If this is a reality, it's an extremely scary reality, and we can't ignore it. There's so much to say and so little time. I'm going to try to give you some positives, but it's no news to you that campuses are a battleground for this, and it's not comfortable everywhere being a student these days. I have to say that there is a variety of campuses, and I polled 3 of my college friends, and all 3 of them said it's not so bad. However, it was bad 3 years ago at OSU. There was a student senate, horrible, uncomfortable. thing more years ago than that. There were students arrested at OSU for protesting an anti-Israel speech. It is very much there. But there's a non-Jewish, and this is a very long article, and there's no way I'm going to read it all to you. I'm just going to read you a couple words. But there's a non-Jewish professor at the University of Edinburgh who was commenting about why there's so much unmerited criticism of Israel, and also specifically picking out Israel when there is so many times worse offenders of any kind of human rights and people speaking with no knowledge whatsoever. His concept, I believe, transfers to many university sites not these days, and many university professors who have used the university as a forum. The university is supposed to be about learning to use your brain, to think rationally, to examine evidence, to reach conclusions based on solid evidence, to compare sources, to weigh up one view against the other. And his thesis is universities are not, students are not at universities to be propagandized, but that's exactly what happens in many cases, particularly if they let themselves. There are many, many Jewish young people who are at best indifferent to the existence of the Jewish state, and many who have signed on to support an organization that I absolutely abhor because I was firsthand subjected to them twice in my life, and it's called the Jewish Voice for Peace. This is Cheryl speaking, but JVP, and Students Justice for Palestine, and something else it's called If Not Now When. These are students who don't check out any facts, not unlike some of us as adults, and basically become weapons against our people unknowingly. They think they're doing the right thing. They are not. They are idiots. That's Cheryl speaking. No regrets. Okay. I'm going to mention one thing that is recent. If this is at Tufts, and this is just an example of things that happen constantly, but Tufts University, this is in February, less than 2 months ago. The student government is moving to impeach a Jewish member who opposed a referendum that blamed Israel for militarizing police in the United States. Oh, by the way, you know that the leftists, some of you know that you're smiling. It's not, that this is another leftist thing, that the police violence is Israel's fault. Okay, if you didn't know that, now you know that. Okay. So anyway, so there was a referendum saying, and he was voting against it, that blamed Israel for militarizing the police in the United States. They're probably responsible for that woman grabbing her gun instead of her taser yesterday also. Anyway, so his name, Max Price, a junior and a member of Tufts Community Union Judiciary, objected to a resolution that erroneously claimed that the university sent campus police to an Israeli police training program. He has been facing months of harassment and anti-Semitic attacks from his peers. At the behest of Students for Justice in Palestine, members of the Student Judiciary Committee asked Price to recuse himself from further deliberations after he pointed out a series of factually incorrect assertions in the referendum. Students for Justice in Palestine members called Price biased. They're not. Other student leaders said Price's Jewish identity created an unavoidable conflict of interest. This argument is happening a lot, that Jews can't be in anything, can't have an opinion because they can't be unbiased. Of course, none of the other folks suffer any bias. Price refused to remove himself from discussions. That prompted Students for Justice in Palestine to demand that Price's microphone be silenced. The Judiciary Committee relented, and Price was unable to speak. He was muted at the meeting. Continues, the school to this date has largely ignored Price's complaints. Administrators referred him to the Tufts Office of Equal Opportunity, which told Price that it doesn't deal with allegations of anti-Semitism. He says the office is uninterested in being honest. I would say that this, or a version of this with different names and places, something that comes up every couple months, maybe actually for the last 10 years, and it's only kind of gotten worse. another thing I'd like to share with you, because it might not be clear, and just to um, help crystallize this information, is a statement from somebody about the Confederate flag. Because why do we see it? My husband and I went to Hocking Hills to get away from it all last, I want to say maybe September, and I couldn't, it's a different world from Beechwood, Ohio down there. Couldn't believe we saw dozens, if not hundreds, of Confederate flags. I didn't get it. Okay. As far as I know, Ohio was on the Union side. Anyway, this is someone who says, I grew up in rural Alabama. He is a Jew by choice. I grew up in rural Alabama, not in a Jewish family, but in a family with plenty of racist members. The Confederate battle flag was a very common sight in my childhood. A common phrase that I heard growing up was, Jews and the N-word are taking over everything. Don't think for a minute that they don't group us together today when they wave their hate flags. There were plenty of people in my hometown who thought the only thing that the Nazis did wrong was to fight America. Most Americans have no idea how pervasive this hate is in the South. Sure, plenty of Jews lived in the Confederacy and supported its cause. They will trot out Judah Benjamin and a random Confederate soldier or businessman as proof the Confederacy didn't hate Jews. But I'm not talking about the Confederates of the 1800s. I'm talking about today's undereducated hate mongers. We saw this all becoming more and more public over the past 5 years, culminating in an open insurrection on January the 6th. For anyone who was honestly surprised by this happening, I don't know what to say to you. We've been heading this way for a long time. For most of my 50 years on this earth, I've heard about how things are changing in the South and how it's not like that anymore. Maybe in the cities, maybe in the universities, maybe in the polite spaces that where civilized people walk. But don't let that fool you. Not everywhere. Ethnic studies, California. What is ethnic studies? It's a curriculum thing. Perhaps you've heard about it. Perhaps you've been in school with it. Perhaps you know kids who have been in courses with ethnic studies. It has evolved very often, and again, these are not absolutes, but very often to something that is far from being multiculturalism. It's not no longer a way of exploring or celebrating America's pluralistic society. It's become kind of a recruiting arm for a certain political ideology. One of the things in ethnic studies is that Jews are basically not included. The ethnic studies curriculum that was just passed in California, which was extremely contentious, and several groups, not only Jewish, but Irish and Italian and others, campaigned to have a more pluralistic approach, and they didn't succeed very well. Apparently, Molly, the Jewish great American doll, gets mentioned once. Big deal. You know, that doll thing, the immigrant from 19 whatever 10 or 06 or whatever, that's the Jewish contribution to America in terms of this ethnic studies. But essentially the whole thing is very much a thing about teaching of people of color and kind of delegitimizing white anything. If you can handle more good news. Okay, this is a statement, an organization that I really liked that was a very small organization about 10 years ago. It's called Stand With Us. It's really becoming a powerhouse in terms of having a Jewish voice in the United States, based in California. This is about, there's a statement here about ethnic studies and how dissatisfied they were with the superficial, really meaningless changes. But they also make a statement about something else that happened, and this was in November of last year, 2020. Rehiring a principal who is politically neutral on the Holocaust. This was on November the 2nd. A decision is forthcoming today regarding the rehire of a Florida principal who told a parent that as a school district employee, I can't say the Holocaust is a factual historical event. At stake is the message that it will convey about the integrity of the school's Holocaust education and state law requiring that it be taught in schools. At stake also is whether the district is fostering a culture of respect to students, parents, and teachers and tax-paying community members that has a large concentration of Holocaust survivors and children. This is the Boca area, by the way. On October 7th, the school board voted 4-3 in favor of reinstating Latson. And his statement was that he doubled down and he said, "Not everyone believes that the Holocaust happened, and you might have your thoughts, but we're a public school, and we have no beliefs, and we cannot state such beliefs." Okay? It's a little bit, I'm having kind of disbelief, but that's where it is. That's where it is. Okay, so we got to go to one more talking point, and that is media and TV. And this is like 2 months ago, I was watching The Nurses, which is an okay show. And this is particularly NBC attacks at the moment. And not because I was looking for that, but my examples just happen to come from NBC. I'm sure there are other sources as well. I don't know if you're familiar with this drama that focuses on the nurses as opposed to the docs. And the particular episode was about one of the storylines was about a young kid who was in danger of losing his leg totally unless he got some sort of, I can't think of the word, of a transplant of some bone tissue from a cadaver. And they are dressed in the total stereotypical Hasidic Uber garb kind of look, which is like, every Jew dresses in every hospital, as you know. And when the doctor tells the father says, "Oy vey, that can't be. He might get bones from a goy or even worse, a black person." And that is so totally anti-Semitic. It is absolutely 100% non-factual. If you've been with me or if you've been on this earth, that Judaism does not teach that. We teach that you use medical science to the good, and there's no such thing as that kind of prohibition. And all of us are created b'tselem Elokim, in the image of God, and that's not just word, folks. That applies in the hospital room as well. But basically, this guy takes his kid out of the hospital knowing he's going to never walk again because he doesn't want to risk getting this bone tissue. And that's the storyline. And I can't believe this. There's more to it than that. I mean, his language was horrible. The whole thing was written. And I'm thinking, nobody complained who was on the set and producing this thing. It's not factually correct, and it's hateful, and it's anti-Semitic. At any rate, by the next morning, there had been a lot in the media, a lot of criticism, and they did pull. I mean, a lot of people watched it, I'm sure, that night, but they did pull it in terms of on demand. So it is no longer available. If you missed it, you're lucky, you're not going to see it, but it was horrible. Also, Saturday Night Live, you may be familiar with the Michael Shea comment about, a lot of you are nodding your head, about when they talked about how there's a high vaccination rate of 50% of people in Israel have been vaccinated. Michael Shea said on Saturday Night Live, "I bet it's the Jewish half." He has a history of making those kind of comments, including about Nazi beauty pageants and other kinds of comments like that. He received no repercussions as far as I know. It's certainly still available to watch. If you need to know about, this is an example of picking up on something and weaponizing it. The whole thing with Israel and the vaccine is that they made a deal with Pfizer to be basically a test ground to have share their data. And I've shared this with you in another class in what we know about Pfizer, and things are coming out that are helpful even as recently as yesterday in that particular regard. And it's also true that very early on, they offered some help to the PA, Palestinian Authority, and the Palestinian Authority opted out. They said they would do it themselves. The United Arab Emirates offered PPE through the PA to the PA, that they were going to supply this. This was also early on, and the Palestinian Authority would not accept it. Why? Because it would be coming through the port of Haifa. And they didn't want anything to be any way construed as Israel assisting in their fight against the coronavirus. Those kinds of things. Now there is some sharing of dosages. They're willing to take some with people who have close contact. I'm oversimplifying, but the point is that there are two sides to the story. By international law, the Palestinian Authority was responsible for their own vaccine protocols, and they opted to exclude any Israeli help early on, but that's not what you get from many of these stories. There was a news story about the success of the vaccine in Israel not too long ago. I lose track of time, maybe a month or two ago. And essentially the story was a very positive one, again on NBC. And then at the end, they had to put in a sentence, some critics suggest that not enough Palestinians have been, they had to put some critics suggest, that sentence had to be for equal time, so to speak, put into something that would otherwise be a positive story. I feel very strongly about this. I've been aware of this balance, this politically correct balance, which is often not factual, and the need to not say things that are very positive about Israel for many, many years. Just last week, there was a story about some archaeological finds from, where were they from? From the pyramids or something like that. And they said that they were found in Palestine. Okay, they weren't. But, some people can't get the word Israel, still can't get it out of their throat. If you want to read more about this, you can read Barry Weiss, who's the one who quit the New York Times because she was only allowed to publish politically correct. Anything that was too positive about Israel, even though it was 110% factual, she was asked to, they pulled it, or she was asked to publish another side to it. So anyway, those are some things in terms of the media. One of the teachers that I shared with you, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, a time or two ago, talked about, when is anti-Semitism real? When it becomes mainstream, when it doesn't get the dander up in people, when people don't object to it, when it's greeted with silence as opposed to repugnance. So when anti-Semitism gets no reaction, when it's in the mainstream media and ordinary people aren't appalled or shocked, when it happens continually without comment, that's when it's time to worry. Right now, we've got the mainstreaming of anti-Semitism. We talk, in my description, I talked about what we're going to do about it, how to react, and I think I would be remiss if I didn't touch on the subject. What we can't do is deny it, or what we're tempted to do, say, that's terrible, I can't believe it, and walk away. I'm not telling you to not obsess. I'm telling you don't obsess. I'm telling you, though, that you cannot deny it. You can't walk away. Disbelief is a really bad defense mechanism. It didn't work in Europe, in Germany, in the mid-30s, 1930s. It wouldn't work now. As you know from Elie Wiesel and other sources, as he said, the opposite of good isn't evil. The opposite of good is silence. I sent you, and it's linked in today's email reminder, some suggested things to do. There's no way it's a huge list, but doing one or two of them matters. I'm going to suggest that hate is very easy when it's against a faceless other. One of the easiest things that you can do, and it might be out of your comfort level, is to be visible. Be a visible Jew. You don't have to be an obnoxious visible Jew. But when the opportunity exists, much like it is with this newish organization, Zionists, and we are supporting other causes, be there as a Jewish person and make sure that people know it. I've looked for opportunities when people say, Merry Christmas to me. I say, thank you so very much. Next time you know me by now, you can say Happy Hanukkah, and I wish you a very Merry Christmas. I don't think that I've ever offended anybody, but in many of my circles and in my life, and I've gotten around, ladies, I've been the only Jew that they know, and that has impact. the only Jew they've ever met. Hard to believe. Living in Cleveland, you're in a bubble. Trust me, it's real. Be a positive person and understand, like some people I know who wear kippot all the time tell me, I'm always on on stage, so to speak. I have to watch my behavior because I know that I'm representing others and people are going to judge all of us because of the way I be. So it makes me a better person to wear a kippah. Even if you don't wear a kippah, I'm saying that please be visible. Don't hide it. We are so actively involved in supporting other people's needs. It's time for us to step forward and defend ourselves and support our own needs. What do you tell kids? Thought about this, actually called one of the local rabbis. We had a lovely conversation about this. It's a terrifying idea, and the future at this point continues to be terrifying. I want you to know that kids are resilient. I mentioned that I come from a family of survivors. The word Hitler was something I probably knew when I was 4 years old in concentration camp. I survived. It was part of conversation, not obsessive. And it was totally balanced in my home with a great blessing of the joy of Judaism and beauty in many different ways. So Judaism wasn't about the negatives and about fear. I don't believe in negative Judaism, but kids are resilient. And if it's part of the conversation and basically saying that people who don't know us, there are some bad people out there who hate us, and there's some good people out there who don't know us, and they need to know us so that they don't hear from these bad people. That kind of thing at age 3 or 4 helped me. And I'm just suggesting that maybe it still works. It's gonna happen. They are gonna hear something. My rabbi consultant was saying that the thing that he hears most often, which is old news, is that you're Jewish, you must be rich. Your parents are rich all the time. And you have to basically role play with these kids, tell them that really isn't a kind thing and it doesn't matter. You don't know me, and why? Let's talk about what we have in common, and let's, yes, we have a nice house. We're very lucky, but you have to basically make these people have some words to come back, not just run away crying or feel bad. Because what it does to their psyche, kids, is make them feel that they're hated. And why would they want to be part of a club of people who are hated? Why would they want to identify? The other one that's still out there is Christ Killer. And it's out there more now than it used to be. It's kind of back. Again, I have found, and I don't have I can certainly, if anybody wants to continue the discussion, we can work it through. It's just because of time. But there are simple 2 and 3 word sentences that you can prepare a kid to say that they feel good about, that they can answer. Basically, the answer is, I don't really understand what you're talking about. I don't know anything about that, and I never killed anyone. So that's a simple one at a young level, but there's more to talk about. I just wanted to give those particular ideas to you. Teach age appropriate facts, but there are some bad people out there, and they just don't know you, and let them know you in a good way, and be kind and kill them with kindness, and that works too. Also, if it's really bad, tell an adult, talk about it. It's a teachable opportunity on both sides. Some of this is bullying, period. And these kids have been, as they go through school, will be exposed to bullying training now, which is a thing. And this goes under whatever tools are they're exposed to in that context really can apply to this too. This is, at some strong level, bullying. We've always survived. I'm getting to the end. We've always survived. We will continue to survive. I want to read to you 2 things and then I will end. The first one is from Jordana Horn, Dara Horn's daughter. And this was a reading for the Seder night, which wasn't so long ago. So if you would, in your mind, wind back with me a little bit to these words in terms of something to say at the table. Tonight we will open the doors to our homes to welcome in a taste of the world to come. All who are hungry, let them come and eat in our Seder feast. Let them hear the story of how far we've come over thousands of years. We live. During the Spanish Inquisition, Jews were told that they could either convert to Christianity or be killed. And yet, years later, we live. During World War II, the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto in Poland fought a fierce, brave rebellion against Nazi oppressors. And yet, years later, we live. In 2002, a suicide bomber walked into a Park Hotel in Netanya in Israel on the first night of Pesach, where the room was filled with Jews holding a Seder, and blew himself up and murdered 30 people. And yet, years later, we live. A man walked into the Tree of Life Synagogue in Squirrel Hill neighborhood in 2018 with an automatic weapon and murdered 11. And yet we live. Tonight we sit down at tables for a celebration and a ceremony that shows that in spite of everything we endure, we have been slaves in Egypt, we've been murdered in our own towns and places of worship. There are those who have wished us dead, and there are those who still want to wipe us off the face of the earth. Sitting at the Seder is an act of courage, it's an act of hope, it's an act of affirmation of Jewish identity, and it is an act of attempting to create a new and better world. I want to mention a couple of organizations that are on the forefront of this. ADL hopefully is getting stronger and having a voice and doing more than just tracking. The Wiesendahl Center has been doing things, particularly against white supremacist groups. People who have come forth a lot. JCRC is doing some things too, increasingly now. Some of these organizations have been tough to budge because they have such strong ties with certain interest groups that they don't want to offend anyone. It's really time to offend. The AJC, American Jewish Committee, has really done a wonderful job. They have been the voice of the American Jewry for the last 6 months or more. Kol hakavod to them. Also, as I mentioned, Stand With Us as another organization. If you don't know it, check it out. Okay, folks, I'm almost at the end. I may run 1 minute over. One of the people that I respect highly, I don't think I've ever shared with him at all. His name is Rabbi Shmuley Yanklowitz, and he's a young activist, progressive, I hate to use liberal Orthodox, amazing. If Jews had saints, he's a saint. Okay, he's not only donated a kidney and has raising his own family and providing sanitary napkin protection to all of the women in immigration custody on the entire Mexico-U.S. border, and toys and teddy bears to the children, and did I mention he has 4 or 5 foster children in addition to his own 4 or 5 and all this? Anyway, this amazing guy. There's a lot about him. I looked at my little children this morning on their way to school and tried to briefly explain to them, this is last week was Yom HaShoah, what Yom HaShoah was, so that they were prepared when it would come up at school today, and how to contextualize this sad story among all the rising anti-Semitism today. Far-right evangelicals who view Jews as pawns to their messianic redemption, fundamentalist Islamists, fundamentalist Islamic terror groups that want to slaughter Jews, certain far-left ideologues who teach that Jews are the center of all of the evils of colonialism and global systems of oppression, white nationalist terrorists emboldened in the last few years who walk into synagogues to kill Jews in prayer simply because they're Jewish. If someone tells you it's all coming from one place, you know they're drowning in their own myopic political ideology. Given all of this, it's not hard to understand why one would either choose assimilation, throwing off any public Jewish identity, or isolation, the 2 most common choices in American Jewish life. And all I could do was look into my children's sweet eyes and affirm a narrative of responsibility rather than a narrative of victimhood. That we are not the eternal victim, but the eternal resilient survivor. That for every story we tell of a Jew who was kicked and beaten, we tell a story of a heroic Jew who helped raise others up from the mud of despair and suffering. Reinforcing intergenerational trauma will distract us from our raison d'etre to bring glory each day to our Creator. May we do it for the honor of the Torah. May we do it for the honor of the 6 million and more killed. May we do it to honor our own children. May we do to them to honor the life, a living life of virtue and nobility that ensures that, yes, we will outlive them. Every single agent of hate we will outlive. Never forgetting what has been done means that in their memory each day, we commit to acts of tikkun and teshuva, to living with the holy purpose of mitzvot, and to perpetuate acts of love and kindness. Cheryl's last words are Hillel, im lo achshav imatai, if not now, when? Im ein ani li mili, if I'm only for myself, who am I? Ika ani sha'ani latzmo ma ani. If I'm only for myself, what am I? Again, if it's not now, when? It's now. Sorry, I went over 3 minutes. Sorry, you guys hardly talked. This has been recorded. I'm going to say that if you want to react, I almost need it. I'm going to ask, I don't know what our time limit is now, but if you email Lisa, maybe we can do a debriefing session sometime. If you don't want it, if this is enough, you can email me too. We can maybe put something together, because I had said that you would be able to react, and I apologize. There was so much, and I promise you I only did a third of the material that I found that I wanted to share. Okay.
Can we stay over now
I don't
at
know.
all?
Lisa? Well, until she shuts us down. Anyone who needs to leave, please feel free. I understand, but I've talked so much. I certainly, if someone, I'm going to ask you to try to be a little bit concise just due to the time, but if please speak up. Lisa, you're on. Can they?
Yeah, you definitely could have at least 10 more minutes.
Okay, well, we'll see if we need it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, if anybody wants to talk, maybe we don't need it, but
I do, but Erica's got her hand up.
Erica.
Cheryl, my granddaughter goes to Cincinnati University, and just this year they have 2 incidences of putting swastikas on the building, and she doesn't live in a Jewish building. And part of it they could take off that was painted, but what was carved into the stone or whatever, I don't know how they got rid of. But besides that, I want to mention, I don't know if it happened to anybody else, Erev Rosh Hashanah last year, I received a note in my mailbox that said the Nazi Party welcomes Pelosi to some meeting. And it was a handwritten thing. By the time I called the police, they already had another person calling them. So I don't know how many people got it. Unfortunately, I have a big mouth, and I don't know, maybe I thought it was personal, but I live on Richmond Road and I had a Biden sign, so I don't know which one was more important. But, and then on Yom Kippur, there was another bunch of people that got the sign.
Okay, this happens. I've received also, and this certainly appeals to people who are literally mentally ill as well. This is an opportunity to be important. That doesn't make them any safer, but that is another group without really a political agenda. So a lot of those kinds of things, especially handwritten ones, it's just opportunity. And I'm sorry, what you talk about the University of Cincinnati, absolutely, I know about it, but the list is almost every university in the country at some point. So it's not. I have Rena and Jackie. Is that what I said? Rena, are you raising your hand? No, okay, you're just waving at me. Okay, Jackie?
Okay,
I can't see all of you, so you might have to speak up. You're not all on the screen. Okay.
First of all, thank you so much. I know I didn't have to say that, but I know the work you went to, and it's important. I think I've been affected recently so much by this thinking that I decided to take a positive course. And I got involved with JNF, and the reason is because I'm choosing to focus on the good that Jews do and the good that's happening in Israel for the world. And that's the word I'm spreading. I also support Arab Israelis who are speaking out for Israel. Yosef Haddad is one. He actually flew to South Africa to a BDS panel where someone was saying that Israel was only sending their immunization, their vaccine notices out in Hebrew. And he stood up and said, "You are lying. Here's my notice. It's in 3 languages. You are lying." In other words, I'm choosing a positive route, focusing on people who have good things to say about Israel, good things to say about the Jews, to try to get that message out, because these other people, you can't change their mind.
Jackie, your homework is to broaden the people who are hearing it beyond the circle of safe people who are open to hearing it.
Yes.
That's the challenge. To only talking, preaching to the choir, forgive me. And I'm not accusing you of doing that. Call a kavod for what you're doing, and it's super important. But understand that we have to somehow get this out beyond.
Yes, as a matter of fact,
Yeah.
I want to say one last thing. I have a friend in New York. She teaches at a school where there is a Palestinian woman who's a big Palestinian advocate, talking about Israel being an apartheid state. I've been holding back because I don't have the confidence, but my friend keeps saying, "You should talk to her. You should talk to her and hear what she has to say." And I'm telling you, I want to talk to her, but I want to be able to have a conversation that is open and where we exchange.
The practice is that people don't want to know and won't listen and will shut you down. That's the problem. When Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib were invited with the congressional freshmen to go to Israel, they wouldn't go because they don't want to know. That's one simple example. But basically, the reason that anybody who speaks against any student justice for Palestine thing is because they don't want to hear anything other than their party line. It's going to basically disrupt them. I'm not saying you can't try, but I'm saying a direct meeting probably isn't going to happen. Who has their ears? It's a super challenge. Does anyone else want to say anything? Fred, I'm sorry, Perlene.
It's me. First of all, it was an incredible presentation. Thank you so much, Cheryl. I've always believed that we must educate our children. We must educate ourselves. We must understand why people think the way they think when they have negative thoughts in their heads. And we must reach out to people that are not Jewish people, that are questioning, that are trying to understand. In the face-to-face program that we had at Shari Tikva, those school children, they went away with concrete examples of what the Holocaust was and how it happened. And I always said in my presentation, I've been a docent at the Holocaust Center in Michigan for many, many years. The Jews did not kill Christ. The Romans killed Christ. If you look in the first Testament of the Bible, that was not the way people were killed. They did not crucify. And don't forget, Jesus was a Jew. And so those little facts, these kids went home with, and they understood. Mm-hmm. So that if we can plant positive things and talk about these things openly, it's a good way.
And I think that's why Hello Israel, when it was going into schools, made a huge difference. The Israel was fine, that information, but the concept that they had this opportunity to see nice, good Jewish people face to face sends a subliminal message that endures forever. Right. Speaking to non-Jews is the trick, finding those particular things, opportunity. It's hard, but important.
Right.
Folks, go and do good. Thank you for being with me. Okay. Bye now.
Bye.
Cheryl?
Thank you. Yes.
Oh, you used the word woke. I keep
Uh-huh.
seeing it in the headlines, especially in the Wall Street Journal. I don't know.
I'm sorry, who's talking? in the Wall Street Journal. I don't know.
I'm sorry, who's talking?
I'm sorry, who's talking? Oh, it's Ellen. Okay, I don't see your head. I only see the ceiling. Okay.
Okay.
I got it, Ellen. Okay, go ahead.
What does that mean, woke?